Guys, welcome back to a new video, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can use Ktor Client in your Kotlin Multiplatform projects. So without wasting any time, let's get started. First thing first, you should go to my GitHub repository, download the initial project and open up into your Android Studio. In this project I have given you all the dependencies that we will use throughout our project. So I'm going to show you the dependencies. So for that, open up this shared module, and in this shared module open up the build gradle.kts script, and these are dependencies that we'll use for the Android main, then for the common main, and for the iOS main. Cool. So let's begin our journey with Ktor Client. So what is Ktor Client actually? So Ktor Client is nothing but a third-party library using which we can perform network request call to our backend using REST APIs. So let's see how we can create our Ktor client first. So for that, I'm gonna open up my shared module source. We have here common main. This code will be shared across our platforms. And within this, I'm gonna create a class, and the class name is Ktor Client. I not want to add this thing for a time being. Okay. So first, let me sync my project. Okay. So now in this class, I'm gonna create a function, and the function name is getClient. And this will return me HTTP client. Return HTTP client, and use here HTTP client that has a pair of parentheses, or you can say trailing lambda. Now in this HTTP client, you can install all of the things that you want to include within your client. So for that, I'm going to use here install. So first I want to negotiate my content using JSON. So JSON is a body type that we'll mostly use with REST API calls, and using this body we will transfer all of our information. So I'm using here content negotiation, and in this content negotiation we are interested with JSON. And if you want to include few other parameters, few other things to your JSON, you can do that thing very easily by using this JSON parameter. And in this JSON will require a JSON object, and in this JSON object I'm going to use here ignore unknown keys, which is true. We'll discuss what is the use case of ignore unknown key. For time being, just be with me. Next, I'm gonna install the timeout. So for that, use here HTTP timeout. And in this HTTP timeout, we have three different types of timeouts. So first, we have here socket timeout millis. I'm gonna use here 3 seconds. Next, we have just simply type here time, and it will automatically suggest you all of the timeout in millis. So we have socket timeouts, we have connection timeout, we have request timeout. So use here connection timeout for 3 seconds, and lastly we have a request timeout, which is also 3 seconds. So we have installed two different things. We have installed the content negotiation, in which manner we're gonna communicate with our backend API. So we'll mostly use JSON for that. Next, we'll install the HTTP timeout. How much time you want to wait if socket timeout will happen, if connection timeout will happen, if request timeout will happen. So for that we have 3 seconds. Now next, I'm going to install the default request, not default JSON. I'm going to use here default request, and in this default request you can mention all of your default things that you must want to include in all of your API calls. So for me, I'm going to use here a URL. So first I'm going to construct the URL, the base URL that must present in our API call information. So for that we'll use here host, and let me show you the API that we will consume in this project. So we are having here JSON placeholder.typicode.com. So this is a website that will give you fake APIs using which you can test whether your client is working or not. So when you scroll down, we have here a lot of resources that we'll use, like we have post, we have comment, album, photos, to-dos, and users. So in HTTP we are having 5 different methods. First, get request, then put, post, patch, delete, and we will discuss everything one by one in this video. So when you control click on it, so I'm going to open this thing in a new tab. So this is a response, and this response is a type of JSON response. As you can see, it uses array, and in this array we have objects. So we'll call this type objects as JSON object. So it will eventually return you JSON array that contains JSON object in it. So first thing first, I need to create model corresponding to this JSON object. So for that, I'm gonna copy this particular object because it's a homogeneous array. That is why I'm gonna copy one item from this array and come back to our project. And in this, I'm gonna create a package, and the package name is model. In this model, I'm gonna use Kotlin data class file from JSON. This is a third-party plugin that you should download from marketplace. Okay, so I'm gonna paste my JSON object and give its name. So let me call this thing a post. Okay, so when you open this post, as you can see, we have post, and this is very much equivalent to our JSON object. Now what we'll do, we'll receive the information in a form of JSON, and eventually we will transform those JSON object and map those JSON object into our model classes. So this post is representing a single JSON object that we were receiving from our JSON array. And one more thing, use here serializable. Otherwise this post is not serializable. The mapping is not possible without using serializable annotation on top of your model. Okay, so yes, now it's time to attach the host. So for that, I'm gonna simply copy this link, come back to our project, and here just paste it so that it's very easy for me to take reference. So in place of host, we have to include this piece because it's a host. Next, as you can see, we are using here HTTPS. So HTTPS will represent a protocol. So we have to mention this protocol in our default request. So for that, we use here protocol. We have here URL protocol HTTPS. Okay. Next, if you want to include headers, you can do that thing very easily. For that, we'll use here header closer, and in this header closer, you can append the header that you want to attach. So we have here a lot of headers that is coming by default from our Ktor client. So we have HTTP headers object, and in this we have a lot of headers. So just use authorization and control click on this authorization. So we have a lot of headers, and you can use according to your requirement. So I'm interested in the authorization, and its value is some gibberish. Next, we're gonna mention our content type. So this content type is coming from content type dot application dot JSON. So basically what we are doing in here, we are mentioning that our content type is in a form of JSON that we'll receive and we'll use for the communication. So that's it. This will give you an HTTP client, and using this HTTP client you can perform your network request call. So now let's begin our network request call. So for that, I'm gonna simply cut this thing and paste it here at the below. So first we're gonna perform a get request. So get request is mainly used when you want to fetch information from your backend, and I'm gonna create a suspend function naming get post, and return type of this post is a list of post. Let me import this post, and we have already seen this response. So this is a response. As you can see, we are receiving a list of JSON object because this JSON object will represent in a form of post. That is why I'm calling this a list of post in our return type. Right now, I'm gonna use my get client, and in this get client, we have a lot of methods. As I told you, we have 5 different methods like get, put, post, patch, and delete. So we'll begin with our get, and in this get, you can mention your endpoint because we have already added the host in a form of JSON placeholder.typecode.com. Next, we have to mention the endpoint. So the endpoint is /post. So this endpoint is actually used to decide on the backend which endpoint you want to consume. So we are interested in /post. And yes, this will simply go to endpoint naming /post and perform the operation. Now it will return me a body, and type of this body is a list of post, and that's it. This will eventually grep the information from the backend and return it to you in a form of list of post. Alright, so we are pretty much done with our Ktor client. Now it's time to use this Ktor client in our project. Now it's time to create our main view model, and this main view model will expose all of the operation regarding the Ktor client to our both platform. So for that, let me create here our main view model class, and this class will eventually extend view model, and a requirement of this view model is of course Ktor client because we want to consume our Ktor client things. Now we are having a suspend function get post, and it will return list of post, and simply I'm using my Ktor client dot get post. Now it's time to use this main view model in our Android first. So first we will do all of the things for Android, and after that we will do all of the things for iOS. So to do this thing for Android, simply open up this Android app module, and in this Android app module make sure to take permission for the internet. So use this permission internet. Now open up the main activity, and in this main activity I'm gonna remove this creating view, and at the bottom I'm going to create a composable, and the composable name is main content. And in this main content, let me just minimize this thing, and in this main content we have modifier and we have a list of post. So in this main content I'm gonna use lazy column that has modifier fill max size. We have items in it, and make sure to choose item that has a list of type T. And now I'm going to use here column, and this column has modifier of type fill max width, but just before this fill max width I want padding. Horizontally I want 12 dp. Let me import this dp, and vertically I want 4 dp. Now in this column I'm gonna use text, and this text is actually used to show me the post id. So it dot its id, and convert this thing in a form of a string. Next we have spacer height of 4 dp. Again we have one more text, and this time I'm gonna use the title, and my style is coming from material theme typography dot body large will be good. Again I'm using here spacer to provide some space of 4 dp. And next I'm gonna use one more text, just used to show the body. And when it's come to style, I'm gonna use material theme typography dot body small. So this is my list item. Now it's time to use this main content. Now in this I'm gonna use my main content. So first let me pass modifier fill max size, and next we have to pass list of posts. So for that, on top I'm going to create a variable naming post. This is not a normal variable, it's a state, and I'm going to initialize this thing with remember savable mutable state of empty list. This is not an array, it's a list, and type of this list is post. Okay, simply import your remember savable. Just below to it I'm going to use a launch effect, and we have to use a view model in order to communicate with our backend. So for that, here I'm going to create my view model. So name of our view model is main view model, and requirement of this thing is Ktor client. So simply use your view model and execute get post, which will eventually update your post state. And lastly I'm going to pass this post state in here. Alright, so now I'm going to execute to see whether it is working or not. Okay, so here you can see we are receiving the list of posts. So by using this approach you can actually perform the get http call. Now let's see how we can perform the post, put, patch and delete operations. So for that, open up your Ktor client, and first let me show you the endpoint for regarding this operation. So we have here post. Okay, so here you can see we have get, we have performed successfully get. Now let's say you want to fetch information regarding the first post. So for that we have this endpoint post/1. So let's see how we can fetch this information. So for that I'm going to create a suspend function get post. We have to pass the id, type of this thing is integer, and it will eventually give you the information regarding the post. So get client dot get. Now this time I'm using here get that has trailing lambda. We can include the URL here, but we have a lot flexibility comparing to the previous approach, as you can see in here. Now in this URL, first we have to mention our path. So path will represent this thing. So simply mention the post. Okay, so now we have successfully created this URL. Now also we have to include one more path, which will contain the information for the ID. So for that, again, you can use your path, or simply you can attach your ID just after the posts. So simply pass your ID. Now it will create a path or endpoint which looks something like this. Okay, so now it's time to use it. So to do that, you can use body and it will return your post, return it. So this will give you information regarding a post with specific ID. So go to your main activity, and this time I'm gonna use here view model dot. Okay, so we don't have function for this in our view model, so let's create it. Suspend function, get post, pass your ID, use your Ktor client dot get post and simply pass your ID. Now let's use this thing in our main activity. I'm interested in the first post. Okay, create a variable to store the value of post, and at the end I'm gonna use logcat to see the information regarding this post. Just stringify this tag, execute it, use this tag and use in here. Okay, so here you can see post body, which is this, and ID is 1 because we are passing ID 1. That's why it will give me the post that's at ID 1, and we have title. Okay, so now we saw two different type of get request. Now it's time to see how we can actually perform this post request, as you can see in here. So for that, go to your Ktor client. Let me minimize this thing. Open up your Ktor client and simply pass that post request. So I'm gonna use here post. We have to pass a post. Return type of this thing is post, so it will simply return you the same post that you have been passing as a parameter to your backend. So for that, first we have to use here get client, and this time we are going to execute operation which is a type of post. So use here post, and in this post, because we are going to pass a body naming post, to do that we'll use here set body, and in this body you can pass your body. Next we have to construct our URL. So URL is pretty much same. Use here path / post, and that's it. This will eventually complete your URL. So we have been sending our body. Next we have to mention the content type, otherwise it will give you an exception. So for that, use here content type. Content type we have application.json, and it will eventually return you the same post that you are passing in a form of body to this request. So return it, and at the end you can use body, and type of the body is post. Now go to your main view model, and in this main view model I'm going to create a suspend function post. Requirement of this thing is post. Use your Ktor client dot post and pass your body. Come back to your main activity, and this time I'm gonna create one more variable naming post of post view model dot post, and you can simply pass your post which you want to actually post to this backend server. So specify all of the argument. We have body, and call this is body. Next we have ID, so let's pass 1. We have title, so simply use here this is title, and lastly the user ID, so just use here 2. Okay, so if everything goes right, the same body I'm getting in a form of response from the backend. So use here logd and simply use the result tag, and this time we are doing the post. Okay, so execute the application. Open up the logcat, and yes, here you can see this is coming from our, let me minimize all of the things for you. Okay, so this first is coming from here. Next we have on create post body. This is body, this is title, and user ID 2. Okay, so our post request is successfully performed by our Ktor client. So we are pretty much done with the get and post. Now it's time to see how we can perform put and patch and delete. Basically we have 3 operations left. So for the put, if you want to replace all of your post body information, you can use put. In patch we can replace a single or multiple parameter or key value pair within our post body. So let's see how we can perform the put request first. So for that, go to your Ktor client, and in this Ktor client I'm going to use suspend function and call this put post. Simply pass your post, because put is actually used to replace the existing body from your backend with the new body that you have been passing from your front end, and it will eventually return you the same post. Return get client, use here put, create a URL, and if you see the URL, it's pretty much same, post/1. So basically we are going to replace a post. So in order to determine which post you want to replace, we require ID, and due to that reason we are passing here post/1, and 1 will represent the post ID. Okay, so let's use that thing. So we have here path, and in this path we have post. Make sure to add here slash, and next we have to also mention the ID of the post. So for that, let me pass ID in a form of integer and use this ID within this. Okay, so what it will do, it will eventually complete your URL. Next you have to pass the body that you want to replace, so post. Next we have content type. So in this content type I'm going to use the content type application.json, and lastly it will return you the same post that you have been passing during this execution. It's time to use it, so go back to your main view model, and in this main view model I'm gonna call this function put post, pass the post, use your Ktor client dot put post. We have to pass two different argument, ID and post. So for the ID I'm gonna use the incoming post dot ID, and lastly the post. Okay, so let's use it. So for that I'm gonna create a variable naming put post, and it will uses the view model dot put post function, and we have to pass here post. So just pass it, specify all the remaining argument by name. In place of ID I'm gonna use 1, in place of body I'm using this is put body, just to be make it little bit explicit to search in our logcat. This is title, put. Okay, lastly we have user ID, so just use 2 in here, and at the end again I'm gonna use the logcat, which eventually print the response, and I'm using here tag, and in this on create I'm gonna use put to make it more explicit. Okay, execute it. Open up the logcat, and here you can see on create, this is the first response which is related to the post, and lastly we have put. So body, this is put body, ID title, this is a title put, and user ID too. Okay, so now we are going to see how we can use this patch. So as I told you, in patch you can replace a single key value pair within your post. So let's see how we can do this thing. So for that, again simply open up your Ktor client, and in this Ktor client I'm going to create a suspend function patch post. We have to pass map, type of this thing is mutable, map of string, or you can also pass here any, it's totally up to you. Next we have to pass the ID, and it will return you again the post. Return get client. Now this time we are interested in patch, so use patch, build the URL first. So in URL we are using path / posts / the ID. So ID is coming in a form of ID. Next we have set body, and this time my body is map, and the content type of this thing is content type application.json, and it will eventually return you the modified post. So use here body, and type of this thing is post. Go back to your main view model and simply use here suspend function patch post, and simply pass, this time we are passing the map. Type of this thing is mutable, map of string and any, and next the ID. Use Ktor client dot patch post, pass your map and the ID. Let's use it. So for that, go to your main activity, and here I'm gonna build my map, which is type of mutable map of. So in our body, as you can see, we have body, title and user ID. So I want to change the title of our post ID 1. So let's see how we can do this thing. So my key is title, okay, and I want to change this title into this is patch request, okay. So this is our key value pair. Next we are going to create a variable naming patch, and in this patch I'm going to use my view model dot patch post, pass your map and the id. So I want to replace the key value pair of post id 1. Okay, so this will give me a problem, and the problem is, so our requirement is mutable map of string comma any, but we are passing a string comma string. So just change the type and make it a string. Open up your Ktor Client patch post and also change this. Okay, come back to our main activity, and yes, we are not receiving any kind of error. Log cat and simply print the patch result. Stringify this tag and also add here patch. Okay, execute our application and open up the log cat. Okay, so as you can see, patch body won't change, and when it's come to title, as you can see title, this is a patch request, that means title is changed. So by using this you can perform the patch operations or patch request. So now we have only one operation left, which is delete, and as you can see we have delete. So let's see how we can perform deletion. Open up the Ktor client, and in this Ktor client at the bottom I'm going to create a suspend function delete post. We simply need id, and this time I want to return the http response. So this http response contain all of the information regarding your response, like your raw form of body, status codes, and a lot of information related to your network request information. Okay, so I'm using here return get client, and this time I want to perform delete operation. Delete, let's build our URL, use here path slash posts slash the id. So id is coming in a form of parameter, and yeah, that's it. This will return you the http response. Now go back to your main view model, and in this main view model I'm going to use suspend function delete post and pass your id which you want to delete. Use your Ktor client dot delete post function and pass your id. Come back to our main activity, and here I'm going to use delete post and use our view model dot delete post, pass the id. And lastly I'm going to use logcat, and in this logcat I want to print delete post. So this delete post is nothing but a http response that contain a lot of information, and on that lot of information I'm interested in the status code. So status dot value. Okay, so in order to access this status we'll need dependencies in our Android app. So I'm gonna add that dependency. Just stringify this thing and add here delete. Now go back to your shared module build.gradle.kts and simply copy this Ktor client Android and come back to our Android application, and in the build.gradle.kts paste it and sync it. Okay, so as you can see error is gone. Now I'm going to execute our application. Okay, so open the logcat, and here you can see delete is 200. Now let me show you that 200 status code means. So 200 http status code. The http status code 200 okay indicate that the request was successful. That means yes, we have successfully deleted the post. So yeah, that's all for the Android side. Now we are going to see how we can perform the same operation on iOS side. So for that, let me open this project on my Xcode. Open existing project, Android Studio project, Ktor client, and in this Ktor client we have iOS app. So simply open it up. So first thing first, I'm going to create a group. So group means package in iOS, and I'm going to call this view model, and in this view model I'm going to create a Swift file. and this Swift file name is ios main view model. Okay, so first I'm gonna import my shared module in here, and after that I'm gonna create a class, and the class name is ios main view model, and this is nothing but an observable object because we want to observe the changes of this view model in our Swift UI. And in this we have a published property, or you can say published wrapper, that has a variable, and the variable name is post list. Type of this thing is list of post, and initial value is empty. Now I'm going to create a function, and the function name is get post because we are dealing with asynchronous operations. Due to that reason we have to use here async keyword. And now it's time to create our view model that we have been created in our shared module, and I'm going to call this view model. Use your main view model, and this main view model requirement is Ktor Client. So simply create an object of Ktor Client and pass it in your main view model. Now I'm going to use this view model and execute get post. Now get post is a suspendable function. That means we have to use here async await, and also we're gonna wrap this thing with do catch. So try catch will become in iOS do catch. Okay, so we have our view model dot get post. Cut this thing out, paste in here, and I'm gonna store this value in a variable naming list because it's a asynchronous operation. That's why I have to use here await, and also we have to use try. So basically we are in try catch block. Due to that reason we have to use here try. So do catch and try. Now I want to update my post list on main thread. So for that we'll use here dispatch queue dot main dot async, and in this async I'm gonna use my self dot post list and update this thing with the incoming list. And in this catch I'm gonna use print to show any kind of error, and also I'm gonna print this list. Cool, so we are pretty much done with our iOS view model. Now it's time to open up our content view, and in this content view I'm gonna remove this thing up, and on the top I'm gonna create an state object, private variable, and I'm gonna call this view model. It's our iOS main view model. Now in this I'm gonna use vstack, or you can say column, and in this column I'm gonna create a list, and in this list I'm using for each iteration and pass our data that we want to show in this list. Well, we are going to see our view model dot post list in it, and we have to pass the id. Now this id is actually used to make a differentiator in our items that we want to render. So slash dot self id, and now one by one we are receiving items. So it's very easy. I'm using here a text, and in this text I'm gonna use my item dot title. So it's a very simple list item. Okay, so now we have to hit the get post that is present in our iOS main view model in order to get the data. So for that, in iOS we have task. So in this task you can perform your asynchronous operation. Well, I want to hit my view model dot get post function. So it will eventually hit this function, and this function update my post list, and we'll see the information regarding that post list in our screen. Execute it. Okay, so build is succeeded, and there we go. This is our title. Alright, so now let's see how we can perform other operation. By the way, all the other operation is pretty much same. There is no major differences, but I'm gonna show you one more HTTP request, which is post. So to do that, just open up your iOS main view model, and in this iOS main view model you can create a function naming post. Simply pass your post. Asynchronous operation, of course, use here do catch because this is a network request call. Sometimes it might throw an exception. So use here catch, and in this catch I'm gonna print the error message, and in our do I'm gonna create a variable naming post. Use here try await view model dot post requirement of this thing is post, so simply pass the incoming post. And at the end I'm gonna use here dispatch queue to update our published property. So let me create here a published property naming var post, type of this thing is post, and initial value of this thing is let's say it is nullable or optional. Okay, so now I'm gonna use here a dispatch queue dot main dot async, and here I'm gonna use my post and update this thing with self dot post, or also you can simply print this thing in your logcat. So let's do that thing, it will be more easy. Alright, so now go back to your content view, and this time I'm gonna execute one more task, and this time I'm interested in await view model post and simply pass a post. We have here body, so in body you can simply pass iOS body in the integer, or you can say id, you can pass 1. In the title I'm using here iOS title, in the user id I'm using here 3. Okay, so execute it and open up this terminal. Okay, where are you, terminal? So here at the bottom you can see post, body is iOS body, id is 101, title is iOS title, user id is 3. Alright, so yes, by using this approach you can actually perform all the other operations too. I'm not going to perform all of the operation because it's pretty much same. You can write the same code again and again, there is no point to do that thing. So yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed a lot. It's a very cool video for those who never did Ktor client or network request call in Kotlin multi-platform projects. So we will meet in our next video where we will discuss something new about Android. Till that, goodbye.